Um, Thank you very much, Yannick. And good morning, everybody. Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes.
Very good. So my name is William Otieno. I'm the regional lead for the Regional Collaboration Center for Eastern Southern Africa, based in Kampala, although at the moment right now I'm in Bonn for a bit of work. And it's great to be here with such a distinguished panel. And we're going to have a lot of probably good insight and good sharing. I'd like to thank you, Tari and Yannick, who are our partners in this project called Green Innovations. I hope and I believe most of you who are attending have maybe had a chance to look at our website because it's a very exciting project for young and women green entrepreneurs. So to jump right into the webinar, it's a series of webinars that we'll be holding between now and August. So you're welcome to follow and be able to maybe participate in others and also tell a friend to always join when they can. Today, as I said, we're very privileged to have with us speakers across different spaces. So we have Dr. Mao Amis from the Center for Green Economy, Africa Center for Green Economy, based in South Africa, if I'm not wrong. We have Paul Mbour from the ZTech Hub in Cameroon. We have Ms. Rosamond Phil Otitwa from Google for Startups Accelerator Program Africa. Sorry if I got your last name wrong. We have Nitin Arora, who's my colleague here at the UNFCCC in Bonn, and he works with the team that's responsible for the Global Innovation Hub. And myself, William, who will be moderating. So I think I'll probably ask Tari what's the run of play, whether we just jump into it with the panelists or would she like to say something first? Tari, please.
I think because of the time factor, I think it'll be great if you can just jump into it, William.
Thank you, Tari. So I believe our first panelist is going to be Dr. Mao Amis. So what's going to happen is that we will have the panelists sort of giving us some presentations, and then at some point there'll be an opportunity for Q&A. And with that, Dr. Mao, I hand over the mic to you virtually.
Right. Thanks, William, and thanks everyone for this opportunity to share with you this webinar. I think that's really been an interesting journey for the last couple of months working on this project. Based on the program, I was supposed to make a presentation, so I don't know if I'm able to share my my screen because I do have can the host enable screen sharing because I do have slides, but if I don't, if there's no need for slides, I can also talk through. I don't know what people prefer, but yeah, so I don't know what, William, do you think I can share, I should share slides or I should just talk through my talking points basically?
I think it would be good if people are able to follow what you're talking about. So Tari,
Okay.
is there a way that Dr. Mao can share his slides?
Yes, I think you should be able to share. Can you kindly try it?
It says host disable participant screen sharing. So whoever is host, listen, I think that it's fine. I can talk through, if need be, through whatever I was going to present. And if the opportunity comes through, then I can share that again. So basically, my presentation, like William introduced, I'm from the African Center for Green Economy. We're a think tank that is based in South Africa, particularly in Cape Town, but we work across the region, and we operate essentially as research and an advisory think tank that acts as a knowledge partner to various institutions, private and public sector institutions, really trying to promote evidence-based policy making. So our forte essentially is on undertaking research and research into action. But for the last couple of years, we have also played quite a significant role, at least in South Africa, in terms of collating empirical data around the innovation ecosystem, particularly green innovation ecosystem, and what it is that is required to achieve a much more inclusive transition to a net zero or whatever transitions we're talking about. And this project that I'm presenting today is, as William had already introduced, the Green Innovation Project that has been ongoing for a couple of, I think almost 2 years now. And in that project, we were specifically requested to undertake some, if you like, landscape analysis of what of the existing structures and policy frameworks across Africa that inform that support youth and green entrepreneurship in the various sectors. And I think that is based on the fact that if you look at the innovation ecosystem, it's there are various actors within the landscape. You know, there is the financial actors that are basically the investors. So you do have the innovators themselves, who are the entrepreneurs. You do have universities that undertake research and so on. And often what happens is that the innovation ecosystem tends to be very disorganized, with various actors doing their own thing. And that is because there is not really a deliberate effort to understand what the landscape looks like, and a concerted and a concerted effort that is required to bring together these different players. So we wrote a report on that, and that I think that report is available. Tari and team can be able to share that with everyone. But I was just emailing my presentation to Tari. She requested for it now. But so where we started was that, you know, if you look at the innovation ecosystem, obviously it's influenced by various actors, particularly from a policy perspective. What is already happening within countries. So the national policies that inform the innovation landscape at that level, but at the same time, those activities or policy landscape oftentimes at the national level derive their mandate, or if you like, the alliance to other either regional or continental, and in this case even global trends in terms of, you know, where the world is perceived is needed to move in terms of the transition. So when you look at so then what we did was we took that approach and said, what does at the continental level, what are the key policies, frameworks and structures that exist at that level? And when you come down to the regional level, what does that look like? And all the way to the national to the national level. So if you look at, for example, at the continental level, obviously we do know that there's the African Union, and the African Union particularly has the African Youth Charter, which really, whose whole purpose is to support young people on the continent, and to really prioritize that. Obviously Africa is a young continent that requires a significant effort to address issues of unemployment, and making sure that our development really speaks to the needs of young people on the continent. So that, I think, that sets the continental agenda for where the continent needs to move to, in terms of even the Agenda 2060 of where African countries have agreed to. So at the continental level, that really is what I think that a lot of the actors or countries are deriving their mandates from. Okay, Tari, thank you. So if you can go to slide number 3, which is basically the continental level landscape. So the second slide there was really about the conceptual framework that we derived, that, you know, if we're looking at the enabling landscape for promoting innovations, you need to think about it both at the continental, regional, and even at the local level. Those really inform the kind of policies and structures that are at the moment in place that support entrepreneurship or green innovation, particularly in this context. And like I said, at the continental level, we have the African Union with its youth charter, and also obviously the African Union has the implementing entity, which is NEPAD. NEPAD has a couple of initiatives under its ambit, including African Skills portal for youth employment and entrepreneurship, which is really basically a portal that is used to coordinate, activities across the continent. And African Development Bank also has several initiatives that are geared towards skilling young people, but at the same time mobilizing the financing that is required to transition into to support entrepreneurship across the continent. Next slide, please. Is there anyone who is pushing the slides because they're stuck on one? All right. If no one can, then at the SADC level, obviously, so that's what happened at the continental level. I'm just really highlighting, the findings in terms of, who the actors are. The continental level, like I said, we have the African Union, NEPAD. At the SADC level, which is Southern Africa Development Community, there's the Declaration on Youth and Empowerment, the SADC Youth Employment Promotion Policy Framework. The East African community similarly has various policies and initiatives that are currently being implemented, particularly the youth policy, and under that they have the youth integration and development in East Africa. And there was also the East African Youth Ambassadors platform. All of these are really initiatives that are geared towards putting young people at the forefront of the development agenda at the REX, which is the Regional Economic Community. Similar to in the West African region, we have the Youth Employment Action Plan, which was designed in 2012. And under that, for example, there's the ECOWAS Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. And then in the Central Africa region, there's also the Youth Connect Sahel initiative, which is also geared towards supporting young people on the continent, to particularly in the region, to prioritize them in terms of development, in terms of inclusion, and making sure that no one is left behind, especially for a continent that is a youthful continent. And if you go further down to the next slide, oh yeah, of course, yeah, the Startup Acts. I think that for me, having worked for many years in the innovation ecosystem, one of the biggest challenges countries have is that there's no dedicated policies that speak specifically to startup and entrepreneurs at a very early stage. And that basically leaves a big gap in terms of mobilizing in investments, in terms of making sure that startups are really prioritized in terms of kind of support that they require. But having said that, I think that the last couple of years have really seen probably really good progress in quite a bit of countries in terms of developing legislation and acts that specifically speak to the startup ecosystem. And here examples that we have had is like Tunisia, that has led that process. Senegal, Ivory Coast latestly is also probably the latest that is on talking about setting up a startup act. And South Africa is also has been in that discourse around developing a dedicated startup acts for the last couple of years. And with the new change with the new government of national unity, I'm hoping that those conversations will come up again. And I'm hopefully going to talk to the portfolio committee for small business to just push and see how far is that conversation. So South Africa will definitely come on board, and there are many other countries that are also already thinking about they need to develop startup acts. And I think that for me the main challenge is there's so many countries in Africa, but we're only talking about 4 of those that already have startup acts. So there's a big need to push on with advocacy and so on, particularly among ecosystem actors, to make sure that more countries develop those startup acts so that you can create an enabling environment for entrepreneurship on the continent. Next slide. And then obviously, this cannot be underestimated, the role of global and development actors, probably from a funding perspective. I'm sure we'll all agree that, the development partners like the GIZ, AFD, USAID have invested millions of dollars on the continent to support youth and youth entrepreneurship, and particularly now with the issues around the signing of the Paris Climate Agreement. There is a recognition that business as usual can no longer suffice, and so climate action has become very central in terms of building the businesses of the future, if you like it. So promoting enterprises that are going to be sustainable, recognizing that climate change poses a significant and systemic risk to the continent. And so for all of those development partners that have undertaken work, we have documented some of those initiatives, like the GIZ well-known initiative Make IT in Africa, the agents for AFD, for example, in 2021, they invested up to about 5.6 billion euros in the continent related to youth and issues to do with the transition to a much more greener economy and so on. So the development partners are definitely some of the very key actors in this space. But while we're doing this work, and I think that one thing that has really come across is that we felt, and it's in the recommendations as well, we felt that there was not enough coordination among actors in terms of the initiatives that are being implemented, priority sectors, and so on. So I think that there is really an important role for this type of program like the Green Innovation to establish that convening platform that can bring together all of these different actors together so that we can explore opportunities for collaboration. Next slide. And obviously, again, the UN agencies are, again, playing a very important role. I'm not going to go into the details considering the time factor here, but the point here is that photo on your right shows the FAO initiatives globally that are geared towards supporting youth on global. And you can see many of those initiatives are on the African continent. So UN agencies really play an important role, and that's why we're actually in this meeting here, because UN University, UNFCCC, they're all playing in this space. Next slide. And I mean, this is just one of the second last slide, is that we're generally seeing that there's a rise. There are a couple of enablers that are promoting youth entrepreneurship in the continent. One is the rise in digitization in Africa, access to smartphones, technology, and so on. The fact that data is becoming very cheap, and so it is allowing more young people to be able to innovate and be more effective in this space. Education levels have generally increased. Even access to finance, even though finance is still a big problem, we're seeing that there's a significant increase in terms of investment flow onto the continent that supports youth entrepreneurs, and obviously the important role that startup accelerators play in supporting the ecosystem. Next slide. This is my last slide, and really about the key takeaways here is that we believe, and the report highlights very clearly, that there is a need to strengthen existing policies in terms of the monitoring and evaluation of those policies to make sure that they're actually effective. There's a need to strengthen the coordination between key actors. I had already talked about that earlier. And also assess the impact of initiatives. It's one thing to say we have invested, 20 million euros, $100 million on a particular initiative, but is it actually impacting, creating a material difference on the ground? Is it making a difference in people's lives? That is something that I think a lot of emphasis need to be put on. Like I said earlier on, many more countries need to develop their own startup acts, because we think that is very, very, very crucial. And finally, even though we've seen an increasing flow of finance into the continent, and if the global climate change negotiations is anything to go by, the amount of investments that the continent require to address climate change and also to promote youth participation on the continent is enormous. So the access to finance is something that still is very urgently needed, but even not that, but even the modality of those access, because there's a lot of funding that is existing, but a lot of entrepreneurs are unable to access those funding because of the stringent rules around them that really make it very prohibitive for startup to access those funds. That's it, really. That's the last slide from me. Thanks everyone for the time, and my apologies for the for the erratic startup. I'm hoping that this will just, give in some pointers to, allow us to have a discussion around some of these key issues that have been highlighted. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mao, for presenting us with that summary from the report. As we've seen, there's quite a lot of challenges that we still have, especially related to policies that support green entrepreneurs. I mean, it's interesting to see that, of course, all these RECs, the regional bodies, all have pillars on youth. But somehow, as you said, I think that sort of switch or penetration of what innovation or how they can support innovation, young innovators or women innovators, is something that I think is lacking, and I think that's why a project such as this is very, very important. I'll just pause for a minute and see if there's anybody who wants to react to the report. I see a hand already up from Desmond Adomako. So shall we start by Desmond Adomako? We will have other panelists also sort of engaging with you participants. So we might need to then maybe push the Q&A sessions to the end. But for now, let's just quickly hear quickly from Desmond. Go ahead, Desmond.
William, can I suggest you go to next one, because I see there's a Dr. Lionel Banda there. If Desmond is struggling to raise, why don't you give Lionel the opportunity?
Yes, go ahead, Lionel.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, William, for the opportunity. Thank you, Dr. Mao, for your presentation. I just had this remarks from the presentations you made. Yeah, thank you very much. It was very insightful. Relating to the Central African region, I want to know, like, what's your experience, like in terms of policy frameworks, because I saw you had some regional cases and you didn't like mention any example from regional policy frameworks from the Central African region. So I don't know, maybe if you could give maybe some specific cases with respect to that. Then the second phase of my question is related to the implementation of these policies. It's true, on your last slide, you talked about this, but I really want to know from the perspectives of the work you did, do you have like key figures, like actual numbers in terms of impacts that these, the different regional policies are having, or what the key international development organizations are doing in terms of like a real impact? How are these funding helping for the different countries to meet their SDG goals and equally help the innovators on the continent? Yeah, thank you.
William, thanks, Lionel. Can I suggest that we respond to the questions once the other panelists have spoken? I've taken note of them, and then just so that I'm worried about time, so that we can just summarize them at the end, if that's all right with everyone. Because I suppose some of the panelists might raise or respond some of the questions that have been mentioned ahead without me preempting what they're going to say.
It's a good suggestion. That's why initially I'd say that it might be good to have the Q&As at the end, but I thought it was something that you'd be able to quickly react to. So I hope you bear with us, Dr. Mbanda. We'll definitely get back to your question if it doesn't somehow slip out or come out when the other panelists are speaking. I see you both have your hands up, Desmond and Mbanda, but in the interest of time, I would suggest that we just move on so that we can start with our panelist, moderated panelist session. Thank you. So to start with, I'd like now to invite our first panelist, Mr. Nitin Arora, who is from the UNFCCC. Who needs to mute the mic? So Nitin is going to tell us what the UN Climate Change Global Innovation Hub is. So Nitin, if you could maybe just come on the screen.
Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, perfect.
Hi, Nitin. Nice to see you. So straight away, maybe you would want to introduce yourself before then we get into the specific questions.
Great. Thank you, Willie. Thank you very much to UNU for organizing this webinar with support from RCC office. My name is Nitin Arora. I'm the project manager of UN Climate Change Global Innovation Hub, which is a specialized project started by UNFCCC Secretariat's Mitigation Division in Glasgow at COP26 with the twofold objectives. Objective A, to facilitate the development of climate and sustainability solutions, and B, to upscale deployment of existing climate and sustainability solutions. And this is something which we are doing through 4 work streams in which we are working in UGIH, which is shortly called as UGIH. The first one is the systemic innovation workshop. So what we do, we organize systemic innovation workshops in different regions. Last year, we organized 4 systemic innovation workshops in different parts, including in Dubai, Saudi Arabia, in New York, and Bonn. This year, we already organized 2 systemic innovation workshops. The first one was in India, in Bangalore, and the second one was in Bonn, which was in May. We are now organizing a systemic innovation workshop in South Africa. So I found Dr. Mao's presentation very interesting, and maybe we can connect with you to invite you to our workshop, which is happening next Friday on 25th of July in Joburg. So if you can come there, it will be a pleasure for us to have you there. So this is the objective of these workshops, is to create a network of networks. So at UGIH, we are promoting innovation, and we are taking a slightly different approach to innovation, in a sense that we know that top-down innovation at the sectoral levels are extremely important. However, we want to complement that with an alternative approach of innovation that is a bottom-up approach. And in that, we would like to identify innovation opportunities at the ground levels, which means that look at the alternative services and products that are needed for meeting the core human needs. So, for example, the core human need of shelter. And we know that because for building the shelter, we need cement, and cement production is resulting in emissions. So what we are promoting, can we look at and find out alternative shelter building materials like bamboo? So this is the kind of approach we are choosing to meet the 5 core human needs, including fooding, shelter, leisure, energy, and education. So our approach is slightly different, and we are promoting this because we think that there is the most transformative innovation potential lies if we can address the issue of innovation when we look at it at the ground level. So this is what we are promoting, and we are using systemic innovation workshops as a platform for bringing different stakeholders to get connected to each other. As an outcome of the systemic innovation workshops, we are producing, actually in the workshop, global innovation projects. So as an outcome of these innovation projects are concrete innovation projects on which we are facilitating the discussions. So individual project owners are proposing these global innovation projects, and we are facilitating by providing access to our networks. We, as part of our network, we have financial institutions, academias, and technology solution providers. I think I'm taking more time, so I'll not go much into detail. I'll stop here, and come back again with more questions from Willie. So I'll stop here and looking forward to hear from you. Thank you, Willie.
Thank you, Nitin, for that very sort of exhaustive introduction on what you'll do. But please stay on the screen because I'm going to walk you through a couple of questions which are sort of directly linked to what you do. So if you could just come back on the screen, please. Thank you. So in what you do, and some of it you've already described, but what do you think are the existing policy challenges and barriers that innovators and entrepreneurs in the ecosystems in Africa face, if you've come across any?
Are you asking me, Willie?
Yes. Yeah, in your interactions in the UGIH, have you come across maybe participants or people who you interact with who have brought to your attention specific policy challenges and barriers, for innovators and entrepreneurs in the green space?
Yes, we have, because we have large network, including stakeholders from Africa, and when I've interacted with them, the major challenges that have come across are in the innovation landscape is inadequate infrastructure. Although I have also heard that things are improving a bit, but still remains a challenge. Then another challenge that has come to our notice is the regulatory hurdles. Again, the governments are coming up with policies like Dr. Mao has just shown to us. However, regulatory hurdles are still blocking realizing the full potential of startup ecosystem that's basically the nursery of innovation. And then again, the most important one, which is the limited access to capital, that remains there. Although, as Dr. Mao has also highlighted, that there have been some improvement in terms of finances that are flowing in Africa, particularly from the venture capitals and impact investing firms. And there are grants also flowing in, but still access to capital remains kind of a challenge. And I think we need to work around that, and we need to promote this startup ecosystem to come up with innovative solutions to address some of these challenges. Thank you, Willie.
Excellent. Thank you. Maybe just as a quick follow-up on what you just said, especially in terms of regulatory bodies. What do you think are the main green sectors in your perspective where we need regulation, where we need regulation? For example, is it more on the market side or on the technology side, et cetera, et cetera? So what would be more conducive for entrepreneurs, to have more regulation?
Yeah, particularly with respect to the government policy or the regulation, I think what we have seen as international best practices is that there are supportive government regulations, like subsidies on green technologies, tax incentives, for example, regulations around more involvement of public-private partnerships. So collaboration between public and private is something which we have seen is extremely effective and successful international model when it comes to implement green innovation. So these are some of the areas which we think are bottlenecks and can be further improved.
Great, thank you. And then one more question is, as we all know, there's all this talk on just transition. So in terms of climate transition globally, do you have any success models or best practices that could create a conducive and enabling environment to accelerate innovation and entrepreneurship in the green sectors?
Yeah, I think there are several key elements that are important. Particularly, education and awareness is very important. I think it's important to promote education and awareness about sustainability and green practices. I think there is also a need to invest more, actually. I must say that significant investment is required in the research and development of new and green technologies. Again, I think there is a need for engaging more with the international partners and, to scale up the green innovation. And I think it's also extremely important to involve as much as possible communities in the various sustainability initiatives to ensure that local people are supported and engaged in the discussions. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nitin. I think as Tari has typed in the chat, dear participants or attendees, if you do have questions, you can post them down in the chat, and we will then circle back to you and then specify which panelist you would like to ask a question to. And definitely, time permitting, towards the end of the webinar, we will come back to you. Thank you so much, Nitin, for those very insightful pieces of advice and information. You walked us through the challenges that are potentially affecting entrepreneurs, which include infrastructure, regulations, regulatory information, the problem with capital, which of course is usually a big problem across all the areas, and also for sharing with us, the importance of involving different players in coming up with policies. I think with that, now we can move on to our second panelist, who is Miss Rosamund Phil Otihiwa.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. It's great being here.
Hi.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. And thank you for honoring our webinar. It's really great to have you here.
Thank you.
I'll maybe just ask you to first introduce yourself, what you do, I see here that you work with Google for Startup Accelerator Program. So I'll let you make that introduction before we jump into the
Thank you very much.
it.
I would like to say my roles are quite multifaceted. I'm a legal practitioner by training. I've been so for the past decade. However, I play very huge policy, regulatory, as well as corporate governance and advisory roles for startup companies, incubator and accelerator tech hubs within the continent. I currently mentor, of course, like you rightly said, with the Google for Startups Accelerator Program. In this capacity, I do hand-holding and, of course, regulatory guidance for companies who are coming to the Black Founders Fund program. For those of us who do not know what the Black Founders Fund is, the Black Founders Fund is a dedicated fund that's for founders within the continent of Africa, where we give about 150,000 non-dilutive equity funding to startups who are within the growth stages. So from Series A to B and beyond. My roles also, I play a lot of roles in regards the corporate governance sector, both in my country, Nigeria, and of course, policy development across the continent as well. And I currently chair the Nigerian Bar Association section on business law, corporate governance and compliance committee. I also play a role in some venture capital hubs and accelerator hubs as an expert in terms of expansion, business expansion of different startups in Nigeria. So let's just say I'm a lawyer who loves technology, and I find myself being the bridge between the entrepreneur and, of course, the regulator. So if I can put that in summary. Thank you.
Fantastic. No, thank you so much. And it's interesting you've told us the different roles you play being a lawyer. But now maybe I'll jump to specifics about who you work with. So what are the roles that Google for Startups Accelerator Program and SIND Africa play regarding legislation, innovation, entrepreneurship in Africa?
I love the fact that you've categorized it into legislation, regulation, and entrepreneurship. So I'll start from the very last, entrepreneurship. One of the things that we realize, as much as we can say that the venture capital space in Africa is developing, I would say compared to Silicon Valley and, of course, our foreign counterparts, we are quite nascent. There's a lot of growth that's currently happening. I would say that within the space of 2019 down to 2024, we have about close to, if not more, about a couple of billions coming to the African tech ecosystem. And based on the fact that we realize that data insights show that we are the youngest continent. So that means that by 2030, you're going to have a population of about 67% below the ages of 30. And this has been actually proven by research and data. What we've done as Google for Startups Accelerator is to realize that there is a continent that is in need of capacity development. If for us to be able to play business on a global level, one of the things that we do, or I have been privileged to be a part of in the Google for Startups Accelerator program, is to ensure that we support mentor startups, provide them access to funding and resources and networks for growth. Like I mentioned earlier, we give equity, which is non-dilutive, and we also offer hand-holding and regulatory compliance advisory. We've been able to play in several sectors: artificial intelligence, health, logistics, and we have different intake terms where there are applications given, and we are able to steer them towards growth and success. And we have quite a lot of success stories so far. Thank you. Oh yeah, I would also like to add, so sorry, I would also like to add, we also want to empower women. So our programs also place strong emphasis on supporting women entrepreneurs and green sectors, right? We recently worked with a couple of artificial intelligence built programs that were built towards solving climate change issues, logistics, tech, and of course renewable energy. So I would just love to just put that out there. Thank you.
You must be psychic, because you just took that out of my mouth. I was going to ask you as a follow-up, what role do you play, with regards to women and green green entrepreneurs or in the green sectors? But you've just definitely jumped in there and answered me before I could ask you. So fantastic. Thank you. I'll move on to the second question, which is, so what role has policy played in the development of the ecosystem in Silicon Valley, as an example, that maybe you can emulate, back here?
Oh yeah. So in my work, I could go on and on about this because I find myself having to discuss this a lot. I'd mentioned earlier that as much as we like to give ourselves the credit that we have a fast-growing venture capital system, I would like to say that as compared to our foreign counterparts, we are quite early stage. Right. And so this means that we have the Silicon. Now, when you say, so I think it's good to understand what even Silicon Valley represents, right? So it's kind of represents the technological ecosystem that you find in advanced countries like EMEA, Europe, the Americas, and the likes. Now, they've had a system that has grown for almost close to, if not more than 50 to 100 years, because anything that had to do with the development of technology came from Silicon Valley. In fact, that was the headquarters of the very first technology company that literally started, and we already know that a lot of companies go there. Now, why the system is very beneficial to its users is, number one, tax incentives. There's a lot of hand-holding and tax incentives are given for these companies. And that is why you see a lot of companies right now, even though they register in local countries, they would also want to register in Delaware, in Wyoming. Why? Because they've been able to curate a company registration process that considers the uniqueness of a startup's growth life cycle. You would agree with me that a startup's growth life cycle is not the same as a public company that is listed on an exchange, right? So they've been able to curate specific tax laws, grants for research and development, and of course, they even have provision for proper venture capital inflows and outflows into these companies and out of these companies. So those are some of the things that have really set them apart and have actually given them more advantages when it comes to setting up and doing business there, because they actually have a legislation that accounts for the unique growth life cycle of these companies that are starting from 0 to 1, right? And so that as an example in itself is what we have sort of copied and pasted here in Africa. But we realize that, just as the presenter said at the beginning, we have a lot of unique regional and domestic changes that we cannot just copy and paste the Silicon Valley model across board in the African continent. But it's a very good model, and it's something that we are currently now modeling after. But I will believe that for us to be able to be effective using the Silicon Valley model, we have to look at the uniqueness of the African context and take the best out of both worlds to ensure that the startups that are being built organically here don't get lost, right? They understand unique context. They think local, but they build globally, if that makes sense. Thank you.
And I think what I like best is, as Dr. Mao presented when he opened the session, there's all these regional bodies who all have pillars where it's youth, and innovation, etc., etc. So I think the importance of having this kind of conversation that we're having now is, your insight, and your very well articulated reasoning on what can work and what cannot work would definitely help in then somehow, if they would find their way into those recs, so that then their pillars on youth and innovation really get some sort of feet that will be helpful to the Europeans. So I'll just go to the next question now, which is so what are the opportunities of the continental free trade agreement for innovators and entrepreneurs in Africa, for example, upscale in other countries, leading to unique or low, or how the practice is so far. Let me just rephrase that. So what do you think would be the opportunities in the continental free trade agreements that we usually have that could then help innovators and entrepreneurs, to sort of somehow also find a foot in moving forward with their innovations?
Thank you for the question. Perfectly understood. So we've been talking about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement for a very long time. In fact, the 12th Extraordinary Summit of the African Union happened as far back as 2019, right? And the goal was that there should be the operational phasing launch of this project, right? But it would interest everyone on this call to know that the launch of the operational phase happened this month, actually this month, just like last week. It doesn't mean that there haven't been policy conversations and discussions as regards the inter-regional payment system known as PAPS and all those things, right? But we have regulation. I always say this, I'm a lawyer, maybe that's why it frustrates me a lot. We have a lot of regulation, but our implementation is not as fast, right? So, in answering the question as regards how the AFCTA brings opportunities, there are several opportunities. The very first opportunity is that it creates opportunities for creating a larger unified market. And for every of us on this call that's quite widely traveled, you know that sometimes it is easier to get goods out of Africa than within, right? And so these are some of the challenges that we have, that if we do not solve rapidly, it's going to be a challenge for even doing business on the continent. So one of the things that this agreement, which already is on ground, has been for the longest time, is there are immense opportunities for creating a larger unified market. And of course, driving scale and reducing cost. Because where you have a central unified payment system, you're able to realize that regardless of the currency exchanges, right, you are able to have a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to the payment and the receipt of goods and services. So I would say that's one of them. There's also the ease of movement. Based on the fact that, so I'll give a typical example. Let me bring an analogy and I'll stop here. Within Europe, there are several domestic agreements that are signed between countries where there is ease of movement of both persons and goods. This agreement is supposed to ensure that what is applicable there is applicable here, but based on the movement of goods and services. So that means issues as regards payments is supposed to be unified. There's they call it the mandate? If I remember, I'll put it in the comment section. There's a repository where all business owners, startups, entrepreneurs, business organizations, companies can go there, create a profile that automatically puts you in the AFCTA business repository, where you are able to once they go there and they see you are there, they can do business with you. There's the PAPS, that's the payment solution. So there's so many things that are being done. I would just say we have these regulations, we need implementation. I'm glad that we've launched the operational phase. I am hoping to see that things are being escalated quickly and done faster, so that doing business can become easier within the continent, not just within and without.
Thank you so much. I hope that you're able to then get your voice into to the right places so that this can move on.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think we definitely will have probably questions for you from the participants or from the attendees. So we're going to leave it there for now, but please don't go away. I'm sure many people are probably burning to ask you a lot of questions about all the important things that you've just said. Thank you so much, Rosemary.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move to our next panelist, who is Mr. Paul Mbua, the co-founder and CEO of ZTech Hub. Paul?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. William.
Good morning, good to see you, and thank you so much for honoring our invitation to be part of this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just jump in and give you an opportunity to tell us what ZTech Hub is and what role or what initiatives does it play in or with regards to Africa's policy on entrepreneurship and innovation.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're connecting with us. So my name is Paul Mboa. I'm the CEO and co-founder of ZigTech Hub. ZigTech Hub is a Pan-African support organization based in Africa, operating across several African countries. And we are headquartered in Cameroon, and we are focused in terms of green technology, driving policy, digital transformation, and also supporting startups and ventures across Africa. So some of the initiatives that we've participated in, firstly, would be an initiative by GIZ, Make IT in Africa, which is called HAWKS. It's called HAWKS because it's Hubs Go Green. So it's looking at how we can tailor the support that incubators, innovation support organizations, right, accelerators provide in terms of supporting green startups, because they have specificities from a generic tech startups. So looking at frameworks that we could also develop. We initiated PAC. It's called Pan-African Agri-Tech Consortium, where it's a range of multi-stakeholders coming together to see how we provide a unified playing field in terms of green technology. In the area of policy, ZigTech Hub is the regional chair for the private sector advisory group for D4D Hub. D4D Hub is an instrument by the European Union and the African Union in terms of driving Team Europe's initiative in terms of digital transformation and inclusion in Africa, right? So we are actively participating through a bottom-up approach and co-creation, where we lend our voice to, okay, these are the key priority areas. This is where we see there's need for change and also enhancement and improvement. We actively involved in this Green Innovation program that also gave us the opportunity to connect with a lot of partners and also learn as we go. We've seen that support in terms of green economy or green entrepreneurs in Africa has to be looked at, differently. So we also, and this program also, the Green Innovation program also acted as a pipeline. So we also look at what programs can build the very nascent entrepreneurs and provide a pipeline for other programs. So I was the lead for the Agri Smart Agri lead hub for smart agriculture. So we had two of our startups that were accepted into the acceleration phase of the YECO program by ITC. So it's also a green program where they have access to mentorship, access to finance. We've participated also in some very critical networks. So there's one also by GIZ and Fireware. So Fireware Foundation is an open source organization where you could develop, smart data models. So this more is looking at how we could encourage entrepreneurs to really innovate rapidly, right? And also reduce the latency of starting. So definitely giving them a leapfrog approach in terms of open source technology, where they can easily duplicate and also not building from scratch. So these are some of the works we've done, also with the European Union, supporting startups in Earth and observation. And we see that we need to do those linkages, right, between the generic, maybe agri-tech, and also what Earth and observation services could provide to bring a broad range in terms of innovation in Africa.
Thank you. Very, very good, and thanks so much for all that. Maybe just to actually segue into what you just mentioned, you talked about policy and all. But do you see specific challenges related to women and how this could be addressed when it comes to their venturing into these innovations and entrepreneurship in Africa?
I think the first thing we see is the human and institutional capacity gap, right? Where we see some of these policymakers not really educated. So we would see maybe fragmentation in terms of policies. So maybe policies for renewable, policies for agri-tech, but not cut across policies with specifications. So we also see that we see poor coordination among green ecosystem actors and also policymakers. So a lot of fragmentation, people not really delving into the deep of what the AU is doing and contextualizing it to their local regions. So we have so many actors. I think that has been said. Looking at the various country levels, since we support startups across many countries, we've seen lots of issues in terms of licensing requirements, regulatory standards, right? So we have issues where there are a lot of administrative bottlenecks. You're starting this renewable energy company, everybody knows you're an SME, and treating you in terms of the taxation system and administrative and legal requirements, it would not, boost and encourage investment. We're also seeing limited financing instruments, right? In terms of, access to finance that has been spoken about. We also want to see targeted policies. So targeted policies in terms of CO2 regulation across the region, because we're seeing some regional hotspots. We have Kenya, we have South Africa, but I always talk about the pyramid where Central Africa is always at the bottom of a lot of initiatives, and that has to change. I would say real intentionality from government agencies looking at this sector as not just this young people that want us not to use
You frozen. We lost you, Paul. Paul?
Yes.
You're lagging. Something has happened to your network.
Okay. Are you guys getting me now?
Yeah, better now. Yes.
Okay. So just to talk about inadequate and insufficient tailored policies in terms of the green sector, and that's where each country has to look at what are priority areas. Our priority areas in terms of renewable energy, blue ocean, and things like that, and also come up with policies, more of a top-down approach and co-creation, having a multi-stakeholder approach where the people can recognize their voice in terms of the policies that are driven. And as my sister said from Nigeria, it's not more about the policies, but about, the implementation strategies. What is the customs person doing in letting a lot of, renewable energy devices from China and killing the local market? So those are some of the challenges our entrepreneurs face.
One final one. Do you think that these challenges are across the board, or do you think, in terms of women entrepreneurs, do they face it more, or this is just something that affects everybody regardless?
Definitely, as we've seen in terms of the rise in female entrepreneurship, so we have a special division supporting, women entrepreneur. Just for the past 1 year, we've been working on a project for AfriLabs and Visa Foundation supporting 60+ women. And one of the things we realized is those cultural and social barriers that have always been there, right? The issues of gender role. So we're having, lots of if you look at even the innovation ecosystem in terms of funding, right? Less than 5% of the funding is going towards women, because the same questions are not asked for the male entrepreneurs, right? The female entrepreneurs have those barriers. I would say in terms of limited technical capacity, because if you look within our TVET, technical vocational educational training ecosystem, it's male dominated. You have all the boys. Okay, you the boy, go to the technical school. So we have lots of things to do in terms of technical capacity and also access to the networks, right? Those female networks to boost them and also support them.
Thank you, Michael. And I hope that again, as I said earlier, this kind of conversations hopefully should give us an opportunity to start slowly shifting, those trends wherever we can. Thank you so much, Paul. Just so that we get to have some Q&A later, I'm going to now invite Dr. Mao for just one question before we open it up for Q&A. So, Dr. Mao, if you could please come on the screen. So, Dr. Mao, this is the final question so that we can then hear from others. So what do you think are some of the successful models or best practices that could help in creating an effective legislation and a conducive environment for developing and supporting green innovation and entrepreneurship?
I'm not sure if I got your question right, but I suppose you're asking for best practices. Is that what you're saying?
Models and best practices, yes.
Models and best practices. Look,
yes.
I think that the landscape at the moment is really, really very complex. Different African countries are at different stages of development and at different stages of understanding what are the kind of policies they need to put in place and so on. So it's difficult for one to say, South Africa has an advanced water management policy and therefore Cameroon should, piggyback on that. It's very difficult because a lot of it is very context specific, and so it's really difficult to translate whatever is happening in one country into another. When my sister from Nigeria was talking about a lot of policy implementation, a lot of policy development but no implementation, it reminded me of an advert in South Africa many years ago. They say that there's a lot of yada yada and less ching ching. What that means is like there's a lot of talk, but there's actually very little tangible work on the ground. And I see that for me, that is really the big challenge that I see. And having lived in South Africa for 20 years, I live in Cape Town. In 2018, we had almost a big water crisis. The city was going to run out of water with a matter of days. So the Water Research Commission, which is one of the biggest funders here, came to us and say, can we do a research to understand what is happening within the innovation ecosystem? That South Africa has all these universities, they've got all these high-skilled water experts, but we're having a water crisis. So we did a mapping exercise of what is called the South Africa Water Innovation Story. And what we found out is that South Africa has got excellent innovators, South Africa has got excellent policy landscape, relatively available financing, but no one is talking to each other. Everyone is talking over each other's heads. And so for me, if you ask me, one of the most important models that needs to be integrated in terms of supporting entrepreneurship on the continent is making sure that there is policy harmonization, that there's these different policies that are being implemented and so on, but oftentimes they don't talk to each other. Agriculture is a food security issue, at the same time is actually an environmental issue. But if you went to agricultural department and talked to people who are talking about agriculture, they're talking about, putting in more fertilizers on the soil, opening in more virgin land, and so on. But when you go to the environment guys, they're talking about how do we conserve biodiversity? Is there a way of minimizing the impact of agriculture, reduce deforestation, and so on? So if there's any policies that need to be developed, and I don't know if there's any of those models around, is really how do we develop policy mechanisms that harmonize each other, that complement each other, as opposed to policies that actually are counteractive, So for me, I think that's really a benchmark of where to go. And if I might just quickly respond to Dr. Lionel's question, which was earlier on, I'm so glad that, and I did it deliver because I knew Paul was going to touch somewhat on that coming from the Central region. Yeah. Our report also clearly found out that the Central African region is, in innovation, we call it like a valley of death kind of thing. We talk about Southern Africa, we talk about East Africa, we talk about West Africa. Central Africa is like this forgotten middle child, So there are not many policies that are on the ground, especially when we look at the regional economic community there. There is no policy related to youth empowerment and so on, but we're starting to see conversations, partnerships with the likes of UNDP to try and say what are the kind of policies that need to be put in place. But I think if we talk about climate change, and William, you'll be very aware about this, is that the Central Africa region, is an important global eco-region in terms of the forest landscape there, in terms of carbon sequestration and so on. So we're doing ourselves a complete underservice if we don't prioritize the Central Africa region in terms of meeting this global agenda of the transition to a low carbon economy. And finally, Lionel, in terms of impact, unfortunately, our report didn't go that far, but the follow-up report that we're developing is to respond to the so what question. So we're developing a policy, briefs and so on to disseminate this information to various actors and say, how do we actually take this ecosystem to the next level? Thank you so much. William, you're muted.
Sorry, I thought I clicked it. No, just said that. Thank you so much, Dr. Mao and the other panelists. It was really great having you all here. But we have a few minutes left, so I'd like to now open the floor to participants to ask questions to specific panelists. So please do raise your hand and direct your question, and one question only, please, to a specific panelist so that we can engage with you. The floor is open.
William, I think there were some questions in the chat box. So maybe if participants are formulating their questions, you can look at the chat box. If I'm not mistaken, there were some questions there.
Yeah, there are about 2 questions, William. One directed to Rosamond and another one directed to Dr. Mao.
Okay. I don't seem to be able to see them.
Yeah. You can look on the Q&A. There's a button.
At the
Maybe Larry or Yannick, one of you can just read out the questions, please.
Okay, so maybe the first question could be directed to Rosamond. They would like to know more about how you can support a startup that is working on EV and battery swapping station for 3-wheeler electric vehicle.
Okay, thank you. So your particular vertical falls under climate and of course also logistics as well. So we have a lot of programs. I would speak representing where we actually dedicate selected periods. Unfortunately, the last cohort for the climate tech-based cohorts closed in May. So please look out for the next in October. There's going to be a registration for fresh openings. So what will happen is I'm going to drop the link in the comment section so that you can see how to be a part of that program. But to answer this question generally, if you need support in relation to your particular area, you need to connect with venture capital organizations that are primarily sector specific to that angle. Because if you are building a product that is in that sector, I would say don't just shoot cold emails, right? You have to look for venture capital organizations. I would recommend some. There's Catalyst Fund that's dedicated to funding and of course equipping startups in that sector. Please don't take my word for it. You know, we are lawyers, we must always give disclaimers. So please do not take everything I'm saying as legal advice. But I would say, please do your due diligence in looking for venture capital organizations and of course, organizations that are seeking towards giving grants. I would say for a sector like yours that falls very squarely within the sustainable development goals, you are very, very attractive to impact-based investors. So you need to do your due research to understand research organizations, venture capital hubs, angel investors, and of course, climate tech funds that are actually primarily disposed towards supporting entrepreneurs who are building products that actually impact climate change positively. So please do your research. I'll recommend some repositories here. Africa, the Big Deal. They have a repository of about close to, if not more, 5,000 to 10,000 investor and startup and venture capital firms, and they actually have detailed sectors that can be, and you can actually send emails and all that. So I would recommend you do your research and ensure that you are able to connect with them. And when you are reaching out to them, please don't just say, oh, I'm looking for funding. Don't be very professional, right? Curate the solutions that you are doing. If you want to send a cold email, make sure that you include your deck. Let it have the impact you're already making, the tractions you've already built. Reach out and say, oh, I would like to have a conversation. We are building something huge. I literally listen to pitches all day. So I'm just giving you off-the-top advice, right?
Thank
And
you
so
so
you go straight
much.
to the point. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Rosamond. Sorry to cut you. Thank you for sharing that clear instructions in terms of how to formulate their questions. So we also have a question from one of the participants here, and this is a question to all the panelists. So the question is, what in your view would be the best way to foster policy innovation and reform so that we can speed up climate action through green entrepreneurship? So I think a quick round for 1 minute from all the different panelists. William, for the question. So maybe we can start with Dr. Mao.
Hi, thanks, Flaubert, for that question in terms of fostering policy innovation and reform. It's a very difficult one to say, but if I'm looking at, again, for those who know, South Africa a few years ago launched the Just Energy Transition Partnership, where South Africa raised, I think, $3.6 billion in terms of accelerating the energy transition. But what we found there actually is that oftentimes there's a lack of, because at the end of the day, climate action is what actually happens at the local level. And so if you're not prepared at the local level, if there's not enough policies at the ground level that allow to foster climate action, it will be very difficult to actually undertake that. So for me, I think that one of the important policy innovations that is required is how do we foster, if you like, a bottom-up policy development that really takes into cognizance the local authorities or municipalities where ultimately climate action is going to happen. At the moment, our policy development processes is generally a national discourse that hoping that, once you have that discourse at the national level, it will gain traction on the ground. And like I've said with the Just Energy Transition Fund is that it's struggling to get onto the ground effectively because there's that disjunct in policy. So if you can reverse how policy development is made, will be very important. But also, even more importantly, is that oftentimes when we think about policy development, it's seen as a public sector endeavor. I'll be very surprised if there's any entrepreneurs or private sector actors who actually actively participate in policy development. So we need to bring in more entrepreneurs who can advocate for the kind of policies that they require. Otherwise, if we leave policy development to politicians and the technocrats, we end up where we are at the moment with policies that don't actually support the innovation ecosystem.
Thank you, Dr. Mao. Rosamond?
All right, thank you very much. Piggybacking off Dr. Maha has said, we need there to be positive integration. I'll give a typical example of what happened here in my home country. We have the Presidential Council that inaugurated the Ease of Doing Business, PEBEC, under the one of our past administrations. And what we did was we created a Business Miscellaneous Facilitation Act, an omnibus bill that literally amended over 20 legislations at once. How were we able to do this? There were partnerships with lawyers, policymakers, government, and they met constantly at town hall meetings and at behind closed doors to ensure that different aspects of legislation were put together and basically keeping in touch with current perceived realities. Now, one of the ways by which we are able to ensure that policy framework is effective and has an impact on the current legislation is to ensure that we as a private sector have to be involved. We cannot leave regulation to the regulators because we are the ones being regulated. And if I've been in any conversation, what I would hear a regulator say, especially those who have the capacity to play in both worlds, both in the public and private sector, they would say, make sure these laws are there. You can enforce them. You can curate and you can ensure that there's a lot of advocacy going on by the private sector groups. If, for example, if you have a legislation that has not yet been signed for a couple of years and that has been the conversation, raise it. Let there be meetings that are being called, because you can hold your leaders accountable. So I will just end there and say, as private sector, we have a lot of work to do to engage our regulators. But let's not leave the regulation for the regulators, because we are the ones that are going to be regulated at the end of the day. We must play a role in policy formulation by engaging them positively to ensure that they do what they say they are going to do. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Rosamond. Paul?
Okay, starting on the existing protocol, I'll just go on 4 key points. One would be policy mapping, very important. Open source data sharing. So definitely now you can know what is happening across Africa. So we'll need that open source platform to really know what is happening and where to intervene. The third would be co-creation approach and multi-stakeholder approach. So both top-down and bottom-top approach. Then we look at continental, regional, and country contextualization approach. So we look at are we doing continentally? What do we want for Africa? So our Africa approach, then what do we want for our specific regions, and how can we contextualize it to our local realities and priorities? Thank you.
So much, Paul. Nitin, from a climate change perspective, perhaps?
I'll say in line with what Rosemond and Dr. Mao has said, that we need more stakeholder engagement. It should be a multi-stakeholder engagement, bringing in both the regulators, private sector, and I think an additional actor, which is civil society organizations, are also very important to be a part of this discussion. So with that, I'll stop here. I think this is what is currently needed to develop that ecosystem of startups where the innovation can strive and thrive,
Thank you so much, all of you. Tari, I need you as my timekeeper to let me know whether we should end this session or if there's an opportunity for maybe one more question or intervention.
Yes, William, I think we had one last question, which is quite lengthy, but I think I can summarize quickly for Dr. Mao. So there's a startup that is still in ideation phase, and then they're saying that they're facing limitations in accessing funding, and then they wanted to know what are existing opportunities that they can have to be helped or supported, even though they're still in the ideation phase.
Thanks, Tari. I think that look, Rosemond had mentioned quite a lot that if you're building something, you need to understand the ecosystem. You need to know who do you need to plug into, and so it's as a basic start point. But it takes sometimes years to develop a product that can actually be investable, leave alone, being sustainable in the long term. So as a first step, you must understand what product are you building, who are the actors within the innovation ecosystem, and how can you be able to respond to that? There's a lot of incubation programs that are running. In fact, as a matter of fact, my center runs an incubation program called the Just Innovation a program that we're supporting early stage entrepreneurs with the aim of really helping them understand the landscape and hopefully build enterprises that could be investable in the future. So Ahmed from Somalia would love to, Somalia is also a very underrepresented region. Really good to hear that you are participating in this space so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I believe with that, we should once again thank all the panelists so much. I mean, this has been so exciting and engaging. We could probably spend more time, but we have to understand that you probably have other duties that you have to run off to. So I appreciate that you took time to be able to join us for this webinar today, and really thank you so much. Tari, do you have any last words, or we can close?
I think the last word I will leave is that for those with any burning questions who did not get a chance to have their question answered, I've already placed in the chat box a link to our community of practice where you should feel free to come and leave your questions, and then we can continue in discussions there. And over to you, William.
All right. Once again, thanks very much, and you all have a good day.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for showing up. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you at the next one.
Definitely.